When I first got into making bioactive vivariums, it seemed like a daunting task and a whole field of care and work I'll need to learn about and sustain. But it really isn't that difficult. Bioactive is a very common term in the reptile keeping hobby. It basically refers to creating an ecosystem within your enclosure. Many keepers don't use proper substrate for various reasons. Many use kitchen roll and newspaper because it's easier to clean. But making your life easier may not be worth the enrichment your animal's missing out on. Charlie, for example, has been digging recently. This could indicate she's preparing to lay some eggs. Female Chinese water dragons can lay eggs even without being fertilised by a male. The eggs won't hatch though. Sadly, this video is only based around animals that require tropical temperatures and high humidity, and damp enclosures. Desert or dry climate animals may have some options, but I haven't experienced or explored that world yet. The environments are simply too dry to sustain the creatures we're using in this video to build these setups. To create an ecosystem, you've got to cover all bases. These guys in return will help keep your setups clean by recycling the organic material back into the soil. Once this material has been broken down, it's much easier for the plants to consume and make use of, fulfilling the natural cycle. Springtails are a fan favourite, often seen chilling on rotten food and feces, but springtails don't so much consume these materials, but rather the fungus that grows on it. Springtails absolutely thrive feeding on fungus, it's their go-to meal, which can help avoid nasty mould growths that overtake enclosures, putting your pets at risk. Woodlice, otherwise known as pillbugs, roly-polies, chillogs, and I've even recently heard them be called chiggly pigs. Google it, they've got a crazy amount of nicknames. Woodlice aren't too fussy, they mainly just avoid food that's dry. They'll break down feces, shed skin, uneaten food, moss and leaves. They may even have a small nibble on wood. But I've had them for years and at worst I've noticed a couple small holes and it's generally only rotten wood. The species you get depends what you're going with. There's 3 species most commonly used and suited the tropical environment. Giant orange woodlice. Highly protein driven, so not best kept with other invertebrates. If you don't feed them enough protein, like fish food, raw meat or eggs, they'll begin to attack each other, and maybe even other viv inhabitants to get their protein fix. This can include things like millipedes and tarantulas. They generally don't pose a threat to reptiles though. I keep them with my Chinese water dragon, mixed with tropical grey woodlice similar to the giant oranges. Still protein driven, but slightly less so, smaller and less colourful. Then there's the all-star, Dwarf White Woodlice. These guys don't have a high protein drive. They're peaceful and active, but you'll often only see them on the underside for decorations. They don't enjoy exposing themselves on the surface. And they're not a threat to other inhabitants, and that's including other invertebrates. Then I also add worms. For the larger enclosures, typical earthworms, I think it's pronounced Dendrobaena. And for the smaller enclosures, whiteworm. Nothing to do with who they're housed with, but more about having enough space for the adult worms. There is one more that I found crops up out of nowhere, every time. Mites. Hold on, don't be alarmed. Not all mites suck blood and attack your pets. These are soil mites. They do the same job as the other guys, they just do it slightly slower. If there's enough space and food, then they're not a problem. The only time these guys become a problem is when food becomes scarce or their numbers grow too high. They can enter a stage, and in this stage they latch onto other invertebrates to be taken to a new location much faster than they could take themselves. Again, they don't feed on the animal. but too many of them can overwhelm and damage the animal, causing death. This doesn't affect reptiles in the slightest, they can't get through their thick skin layer, only a concern for invertebrates. However, because I keep springtails, there's always a competition for food which keeps the soil mites numbers at bay, not a problem. So what jobs are these guys doing? All of them will be digging in and out of the soil, aerating it, avoiding stagnation and keeping it fresh. This is brilliant for the plants and their roots, drainage and avoiding mould. As I said, they'll break down waste for you so you'll never need to switch out the enclosure. Just freshen up the leaves and moss occasionally and clean the front glass. Some will naturally be picked off by the animals you keep, providing them with great enrichment and a good calcium source. Charlie loves eating the woodlice, Roscoe loves digging for worms, and dart frogs commonly snack on springtails. They'll also bring more life to the enclosures. There's your stunning pet being the centerpiece. And then you look closer, below the surface, and notice this entire structure of life. Different creatures performing different roles, bringing a whole new feel of natural world, natural setup to the enclosure. Balance as everything works together, creating a healthy, natural and stable environment for your pet to thrive in. All they need is occasional feeds, an off-cut of fruit, some dry fish food once a week, humid environment as they love it damp, moss and leaves serving as the bulk of their diet. The reason humidity is so important for the woodlice, and comment down below if you already knew these random facts. Woodlice aren't actually bugs or insects. They're crustaceans. Yep, you heard me right, just like shrimp. Woodlice actually have gills they use to breathe, which is exactly why they love damp surfaces and humidity. If their gills dry out, they die. Now I'm not saying you'll 100% always be fine. The majority of my enclosures are self-sustaining with this method. But Jason, for example, doesn't go to the toilet too often. So when he does, it's often too large for the cleanup crew to handle. So I spot clean every now and again, just remove what they haven't made use of. But again, no need to remove any soil or mess around too much. Realistically, you can leave the cleanup crew to find their own food, especially enclosures that have plenty of rotten wood and leaves. I generally don't like leaving it to chance though, and often feed mine once a week. Feeding every day may grow the population too much and also keep their stomachs full on the good stuff, so what's the point in breaking down the animal waste? So it's more of a supplement to make sure they've got everything they need to survive, do well and continue to work hard. After all, they're helping me, so it's only right I look out for them in return. As far as it goes, that's all you need to know about building a bioactive enclosure. So long as the humidity, substrate and food sources are all in place, which they should be anyway for the reptile you're keeping, they'll for the most part take care of themselves and get to work doing the job they're there for. Creating a bioactive enclosure is well worth it. And more keepers are getting involved in creating these natural habitats to benefit themselves and their animals alike. Choose your chosen cleanup crew, order a tub or two of each, or buy from your local reptile shop. And from there, if they like the environment you put them in, they'll thrive and start growing in numbers. It really is that simple.